The raging thunder clapped overhead as Lillian Morgan fled into the tempestuous night, her sodden dress clinging to her trembling frame, blood trickling from her split lip, a cruel parting gift from the man who had vowed to love and cherish her. Wyoming Territory, 1875. The unforgiving prairie stretched before Lillian like a vast, rain-soaked canvas as she stumbled through mud that threatened to claim her worn boots with each desperate step. Behind her lay the small homestead where she had endured 3 years of matrimonial hell with Edgar Thompson, a man whose charming facade had crumbled on their wedding night, revealing a monster fueled by whiskey and rage. Tonight had been worse than ever. Edgar had returned from Clearwater's saloon in a foul mood, bottle in hand, eyes wild with a dangerous glint that Lillian had come to recognize all too well. When the first blow came, she'd made a decision she'd been contemplating for months. She would not survive another beating. Not this time. So she ran into the brutal spring storm that had been lashing the territory for 2 days straight. With nothing but the clothes on her back and a small pouch of coins she'd secretly saved from selling eggs at the market. The wind howled like a vengeful spirit, driving the rain sideways into her face. Lightning split the black sky, momentarily illuminating the rolling landscape ahead. In that brief flash, Lillian spotted what appeared to be a structure in the distance, perhaps a mile away across the open prairie. "Just keep moving," she gasped to herself, her lungs burning from exertion and fear. "He won't follow in this weather. Not even Edgar is that crazy." But she couldn't be certain. Edgar Thompson had proven himself capable of terrible things when the drink took hold of him. Pushing through the pain in her ribs likely cracked from his boot, Lillian fixed her eyes on the distant shadow and pressed forward. The mud grew deeper with each passing minute, the ground turning treacherous beneath her feet. Halfway to her destination, Lillian's right foot sank suddenly, pitching her forward. She landed hard, face first in the muck, crying out as her body protested the impact. "Get up," she commanded herself, spitting out mud. "Get up or die here." With trembling arms, she pushed herself to her knees, then to her feet. Her dress, once a cheerful blue calico, now hung from her like a filthy shroud. The structure ahead seemed no closer than before, and for a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm her. Then she heard it, the distant whinny of a horse. Hope surged through her veins, giving her renewed strength. Someone was out in this ungodly weather. Someone who might help her. "Hello?" she called, her voice thin and weak against the storm's fury. "Is anyone there? Please." Another flash of lightning, and this time she saw it clearly, a small cabin with a lean-to stable beside it. And there, emerging from the stable door, the silhouette of a man leading a horse inside. "Help!" Lillian screamed with all the strength she could muster. "Please help me." Whether he heard her or not, she couldn't tell. The distance was still considerable, and the storm showed no signs of abating. But now that she had a definite destination, Lillian found her second wind. Clutching her side, she pushed onward through the downpour. It took another 20 minutes of grueling effort before she reached what appeared to be the property line, marked by a simple fence. Beyond it, the cabin stood sturdy and weathered, with golden lamplight glowing from a single window. As she approached, the door suddenly swung open. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the warm light inside. "Who's out there?" called a deep voice, cautious but not threatening. Lillian staggered the final few steps into the circle of light cast from the doorway. "Please," she managed, before her legs finally gave way beneath her. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Through a haze of pain and exhaustion, she registered being lifted and carried inside. The sudden warmth of the cabin enveloped her, along with the scent of coffee and wood smoke. "Good Lord, what happened to you?" The voice was closer now, filled with concern. Lillian forced her eyes open, finding herself looking up into the weathered face of a man perhaps in his early 30s. His dark hair was damp, his blue eyes intense with worry beneath a furrowed brow. "My husband," she whispered, tasting blood on her lip. "I had to run." Something hardened in the man's expression, but his hands remained gentle as he set her down on a cot near the fire. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "Name's Wade Harrington. This is my place." "Lillian," she replied, then hesitated. Using her married name felt like keeping a chain around her neck. "Lillian Morgan," she said instead, reclaiming her maiden name with the simple declaration. Wade nodded once, retrieving a cloth which he dipped in a basin of water. "That lip needs tending, Mrs." He stopped himself. "Miss Morgan." "Thank you," Lillian whispered, wincing as he carefully dabbed at her split lip. "I'm sorry to impose. I couldn't stay there anymore." "No need for apologies." Wade's voice was quiet but firm. "No woman should ever bear the marks you're carrying." For the first time in what felt like years, Lillian felt tears well in her eyes. Not tears of fear or pain, but of relief at being spoken to with simple human dignity. "Can you tell me how far I've come?" she asked, trying to collect herself. "I left our homestead," his homestead near Miller's Creek. Wade's eyebrows rose slightly. "Miller's Creek? That's a good 7 miles from here. You crossed that distance in this storm." The disbelief in his voice made Lillian realize just how desperate her flight had been. "I had no choice," she said simply. Wade set the cloth aside and moved to a small stove in the corner of the one-room cabin. "You need something warm inside you," he said, pouring coffee into a tin mug. "Then we'll see about getting you dry clothes. I've got a spare shirt and trousers that might do until your things can be washed and dried." "You're very kind," Lillian said, accepting the steaming mug with trembling hands. "Just doing what any decent man would," Wade replied, though something in his tone suggested he doubted there were many decent men left in the territory. As the hot coffee revived her, Lillian took stock of her surroundings. The cabin was small but meticulously maintained. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with the small cook stove in the corner. A table with 2 chairs sat beneath the room's only window. The furnishings were spare but solid, clearly built by someone who knew their craft. Wade moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to solitude and self-reliance. He retrieved a shirt and pants from a trunk at the foot of a larger bed on the opposite side of the room. "These will be too big," he said, placing them on the cot beside her. "But they're clean. There's a screen in the corner you can change behind. I'll step outside to check on my horse while you do." Before Lillian could thank him again, he had donned his slicker and disappeared into the storm. His consideration brought another wave of emotion. How long had it been since a man had shown her basic respect? Moving painfully, she made her way behind the folding screen and struggled out of her sodden dress. The extent of Edgar's abuse became evident as she examined herself, purple bruises blooming across her ribs, older yellowing marks on her arms, welts on her back from his belt. She shuddered, pulling Wade's clean shirt over her head. It enveloped her like a tent, the sleeves extending well past her fingertips. The pants were equally oversized, but she rolled the cuffs and tightened the waist with a piece of cord she found hanging on the screen. When Wade returned, she was seated by the fire again, her wet clothes draped over the screen to dry. "The storm's showing no sign of letting up," he reported, removing his dripping slicker. "You're welcome to stay until it passes." "Thank you," Lillian said softly, "though I fear I may be putting you in danger. My husband. He has a violent temper, especially when he's been drinking." Wade's expression darkened. "Does he know you've gone?" "He was passed out when I left, but he'll come looking once he realizes I'm gone." She wrapped her arms around herself. Edgar Thompson isn't a man who lets go of what he considers his property. Thompson. Wade's voice took on an edge. Tall fellow, sandy hair. Has a scar through his right eyebrow? Lillian felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet hair. You know him? We've crossed paths. Wade's answer was deliberately vague, but his tone conveyed nothing positive. Had some dealings in town. He didn't strike me as a man worth knowing better. He wasn't always. Lillian began, then stopped herself. Why was she defending him? A habit born of fear and years of making excuses. No, that's not true. I think he was always what he is. I just didn't see it until it was too late. Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. Most predators know how to hide their true nature until they've secured their prey. He moved to the stove, stirring something in a pot that filled the cabin with a savory aroma. Stew's nearly ready. You should eat, regain your strength. They ate in companionable silence, the stew warming Lillian from the inside. Simple fair venison with potatoes and carrots, but prepared with care. When was the last time she'd eaten a meal without fear knotting her stomach? How long have you been out here? She asked, finally breaking the quiet. Going on 5 years, Wade answered, setting his empty bowl aside. Came west after the war, worked cattle drives for a while. Saved enough to buy this plot 2 years ago. It's a fine place, Lillian said sincerely. It's modest, but it's mine. I run about 60 head of cattle on the surrounding acres. Not enough to make me rich, but enough to live on. You manage all that alone? A small smile crossed Wade's face. For the most part. Hire hands during calving season and for the occasional drive to the railhead. Otherwise, it's just me and Brandy. Brandy, my horse. Best cow pony in 3 counties, if you don't mind me boasting a bit. Lillian found herself smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. I don't mind. As the evening wore on, the storm continued its assault on the small cabin. Wade made up the cot with fresh linens, insisting that Lillian take his bed while he slept there. I couldn't possibly, she began to protest. I insist, he said firmly. You've been through enough without adding a poor night's rest to your troubles. Exhaustion eventually won out over politeness. Lillian sank into Wade's bed, surrounded by the clean scent of lye soap and pine. Despite her fears and the unfamiliar surroundings, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to the rich aroma of coffee and bacon. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's single window, catching dust motes that danced in the golden beam. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back, along with the pain in her ribs and face. Wade stood at the stove, his back to her, humming softly as he tended to breakfast. Good morning, Lillian said, her voice raspy from sleep. He turned, a genuine smile warming his features. Thought you might sleep the day away. How are you feeling? Sore, she admitted. But better. Thank you for everything. Hungry? I've got bacon and biscuits nearly ready. After breakfast, Wade brought in a basin of fresh water for Lillian to wash. Her dress, though still damp in places, was at least clean. She changed back into it, reluctantly abandoning the comfort of Wade's oversized clothes. I should probably be on my way, she said, though the thought filled her with dread. I've imposed enough. Where will you go? Wade asked directly. The question stopped her short. Where indeed? She had no family left, no close friends in the territory. Edgar had seen to that, gradually isolating her from anyone who might have offered support. I don't know, she confessed. I have a little money saved. Perhaps enough for a stagecoach ticket to Cheyenne. I could find work there. Wade studied her thoughtfully. That's a rough town for a woman alone. He hesitated, then continued. I have another suggestion, if you're willing to hear it. Of course. I've been thinking about hiring someone to help around the place. Not with the cattle so much, but to keep things running here at the cabin while I'm out working the herd. Cooking, keeping accounts, tending a garden. He gestured around the sparse cabin. As you can see, homemaking isn't my particular talent. Lillian stared at him, uncertain if she'd understood correctly. Are you offering me employment? I am, Wade confirmed. Room and board plus a fair wage. And, he added seriously, protection from Thompson should he come looking. Why would you do this for a complete stranger? Lillian asked, suspicious despite herself. You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Wade pointed out. And I'm not doing it purely out of charity. I genuinely need the help, and something tells me you're capable. The offer was tempting, too tempting. A safe place to stay, honest work, independence. What would people say? A single woman living under your roof. Wade shrugged. People will always talk. But my nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, and I don't much care for gossip anyway. If it bothers you, though, there's a small lean-to out back. With some work, it could be converted to separate quarters for you. Lillian considered his proposal. It was risky in some ways putting her trust in another man after her experience with Edgar. But something about Wade Harrington inspired confidence. He had been nothing but respectful, and she sensed no ulterior motives in his offer. I accept, she said finally, though I insist on earning my keep fully. I'm a good cook, and I can keep accounts. I managed all that before. Then it's settled. Wade extended his hand, and they shook on it, a simple business arrangement that nonetheless felt momentous to Lillian. A new beginning, a chance at freedom. I should warn you, she said. Edgar won't let this go easily. When he finds out where I am, Wade corrected. And if he does, he'll find more than he bargained for. I don't take kindly to men who beat women. Over the days that followed, Lillian settled into life at Wade's ranch. True to his word, he set about converting the lean-to into a small but comfortable cabin for her, adding a proper bed, a small stove, and even a window that caught the morning light. For her part, Lillian transformed the main cabin, bringing order to Wade's bachelor existence. She deep-cleaned every corner, organized his supplies, and established a proper cooking area with the implements that had been scattered throughout the cabin. Wade watched her work with quiet appreciation, often lending a hand with the heavier tasks. They developed an easy rhythm together, sharing meals and conversation that gradually revealed their respective pasts. Lillian learned that Wade had fought for the Union, returning home to Pennsylvania to find his family farm sold to cover debts. With nothing to keep him there, he had headed west, working his way across the country until finding his place in Wyoming territory. In turn, she shared her own history growing up in a small Ohio town, losing her parents to influenza, meeting Edgar when he passed through selling farm equipment. He'd seemed so worldly, so confident. His proposal had offered escape from a life of dwindling options. I was naive, she confessed one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie gold. I thought marriage would be a partnership. I never imagined it could become a prison. Some men don't want partners, Wade said quietly. They want possessions. A comfortable silence fell between them. Wade's hand rested on the porch railing, inches from hers. Lillian was acutely aware of the proximity, of the warmth radiating from him on the cool evening. I never thanked you properly, she said suddenly, for taking me in that night, for offering me this chance. No need for thanks. You've more than earned your place here. His blue eyes met hers. Truth be told, I didn't realize how lonely it was, living out here alone, until you came along and changed things. The admission hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to acknowledge what was developing. A friendship, certainly, a mutual respect, but also something more tentative and fragile, like the first spring shoots after a hard winter. The peaceful routine they established was shattered 3 weeks after Lillian's arrival. Wade had ridden out at dawn to check on a section of fence reported damaged by a neighboring rancher. Lillian was hanging laundry when she heard approaching hoofbeats. Her heart leapt, thinking Wade had returned early. But as the rider came into view, her blood turned to ice. Edgar Thompson sat atop his dun gelding, his face thunderous beneath the brim of his hat. "So this is where you've been hiding," he called, his voice carrying across the yard. "Playing house with Harrington." Lillian stood frozen, the damp shirt she'd been hanging still clutched in her hands. "How did you find me?" Edgar dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post with deliberate slowness. "You think folks don't talk?" Shopkeeper in town mentioned Harrington had a woman staying at his place. Wasn't hard to put it together. He took a step toward her. "You're my wife, Lillian. Time to come home." She backed away, bumping into the clothesline. "No, Edgar. I'm not going back." His face darkened. "Don't be stupid. You took vows before God. Till death do us part, remember? Vows you broke the first time you laid hands on me in anger," Lillian countered, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "I'm not your property." Edgar lunged forward, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "You're whatever I say you are. Now get your things. We're leaving. Let go of me." Lillian struggled against his grip, the familiar fear threatening to overwhelm her newfound resolve. "Or what?" Edgar sneered, his breath heavy with whiskey despite the early hour. "Your protector isn't here to save you. Saw him riding the north section as I came in. I don't need saving." The voice came not from Lillian, but from behind Edgar. Edgar whirled, releasing Lillian in surprise. Wade stood there, rifle held casually but unmistakably ready in his hands. "This doesn't concern you, Harrington," Edgar spat. "She's my wife." "She's her own person," Wade replied evenly. "And she's made her choice clear. I suggest you respect it and leave." Edgar's hand moved to the pistol at his hip. "Or what? You'll shoot an unarmed man." "You don't look unarmed to me," Wade observed. "But I'd rather not shoot anyone today. Just take your horse and go, Thompson. Find someone else to torment." For a tense moment, Lillian was certain Edgar would draw. Violence had always been his answer to opposition, but something in Wade's steady gaze gave him pause. "This isn't over," Edgar declared, backing toward his horse. "A man has rights. The law's on my side." "The law might surprise you," Wade replied, "especially when the judge hears about those bruises you left on her. Now go." With a final venomous glare, Edgar mounted his horse and rode away, dust billowing behind him. As soon as he was out of sight, Lillian's legs gave way. She sank to the ground, trembling uncontrollably. Wade was at her side immediately, setting the rifle aside to take her hands in his. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak through the sob building in her throat. The confrontation had unleashed all the fear she'd been holding at bay for weeks. Wade pulled her gently into his arms, holding her as she cried. "He won't touch you again," he promised. "Not while I draw breath." When her tears finally subsided, Lillian remained in the circle of Wade's arms, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "He'll come back," she said quietly. "Edgar doesn't give up what he thinks belongs to him. Then we'll be ready," Wade assured her. "But you don't have to face him alone anymore." That evening, they sat closer than usual at the dinner table, the day's events having shifted something fundamental between them. Wade explained that he had forgotten his canteen and returned to retrieve it, arriving just in time to hear Edgar's threats. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner," he said, his jaw tightening. "If he had hurt you again." But he didn't, Lillian reminded him. Because of you. Wade's eyes held hers. Not just because of me. You stood your ground, Lillian. That took courage. I never felt brave before coming here, she admitted. With you, I feel different, stronger. You were always strong, Wade said softly. You just needed the space to remember it. His hand covered hers on the table, warm and calloused from ranch work. Lillian turned her palm up, interlacing their fingers. Wade, she began hesitantly. I should tell you. Legally, I'm still married to Edgar. I don't know what that means for us. What do you want it to mean? He asked, his voice gentle but his eyes intent. Lillian took a deep breath. I want to be free of him, truly free. And then I want to see what might grow between us, without that shadow hanging over everything. Wade nodded, understanding in his expression. Then that's what we'll work toward. There are legal grounds for divorce in this territory, especially in cases of cruelty. It won't be easy, but it's possible. You would wait, even though I can't promise. Lillian, Wade interrupted, squeezing her hand. Some things are worth waiting for. You're one of them. The next morning, Wade rode into town to consult with the local attorney, returning with cautiously optimistic news. While divorce was still stigmatized, cases involving documented abuse were increasingly being granted by the territorial courts. The process would take time, but it was a path forward. With that hope on the horizon, their daily life took on a new dimension. The careful distance they had maintained began to dissolve, replaced by small moments of affection, hands brushing while passing tools, a touch on the shoulder in passing, lingering glances across the room. Spring gave way to summer, the prairie exploding into wildflowers that Lillian gathered to brighten the cabins. She planted a vegetable garden that thrived under her care, and even began keeping chickens in a coop Wade built for her. One particularly hot afternoon, Wade returned from working the herd to find Lillian by the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property. She sat with her skirts tucked up, feet dangling in the cool water. This looks like a fine idea, he called, approaching with a smile that had become more frequent in recent months. Lillian looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. The water's wonderful. You should join me. Wade didn't need a second invitation. He removed his boots and rolled up his trouser legs, settling beside her on the bank. The cool water was indeed a blessing after hours in the saddle. I've been thinking, he said after they had sat in companionable silence for a while, about the future. Lillian's heart quickened. Oh, this land, Wade gestured to the rolling prairie around them. I bought it with a vision, not just for cattle but for a real home someday, a place where children could grow up free and strong. It's a beautiful dream, Lillian said softly. It doesn't have to stay a dream. Wade turned to face her fully. Lillian, I know your divorce isn't final yet. I know we've only known each other a few months. But I've never been more certain of anything than I am of my feelings for you. She met his gaze, seeing in it a reflection of her own emotions. Wade, I'm not asking for promises now, he clarified. Just that you consider a future here, with me, when you're ready and only then. Tears welled in Lillian's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. I don't need to consider it, she said. I already know what I want. Before she could say more, hoofbeats thundered nearby. They both turned to see a rider approaching at speed, the young son of their nearest neighbor. Mr. Harrington, the boy called urgently. There's trouble. Thompson and some men are burning fence lines along your northern border. Wade was on his feet instantly, face grim. Get back to the cabin, he told Lillian. Bar the door. No, she said firmly, standing beside him. I won't hide while you face him alone. Lillian, please. This is my fight too, she insisted, and we face it together. Wade recognized the determination in her eyes and nodded once. Together, then, but stay behind me. They hurried back to the cabin, where Wade retrieved his rifle and handgun. Lillian changed quickly into the trousers and shirt she sometimes wore for heavier ranch work, knowing skirts would only hinder her if things turned dangerous. As they rode north, black smoke was visible against the blue sky. Edgar had apparently decided that if he couldn't have Lillian back, he would destroy what Wade had built. They found him and 3 other men setting fire to a section of grassland near the property line. The flames were spreading quickly in the summer dry grass, threatening not just the fence, but potentially the entire ranch if left unchecked. "Thompson!" Wade called out, his voice carrying across the distance between them. "That's enough." Edgar turned, a twisted smile spreading across his face when he spotted Lillian beside Wade. "Well, look who decided to join the party," he sneered. "Come to watch your lover's ranch burn, Lillian?" Wade dismounted, helping Lillian down before facing the group of men. "This stops now," he said evenly. "You have a quarrel with me, fine. But destroying property, setting fires that could spread to neighboring ranches, that's not just between us anymore." "Nothing's between us except my wife," Edgar spat, swaying slightly. He'd clearly been drinking heavily. "The way I hear it, you've been playing house with her all spring." "Your wife left you because you beat her," Wade replied, his voice hard. "Any man who raises his hand to a woman forfeits the right to call her his." Edgar's face contorted with rage. "You sanctimonious bastard. You stole what's mine, and you'll pay for it." His hand dropped to his gun. "Don't," Wade warned, his own hand hovering near his holster. "There's no need for bloodshed here." But Edgar was beyond reason, fueled by whiskey and wounded pride. His gun cleared leather in a clumsy draw. Before he could aim, Wade's weapon was up and fired, the shot echoing across the prairie. Edgar staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face as he clutched his shoulder. His gun fell from nerveless fingers. "Next one won't be so merciful," Wade said quietly. "Now take your men and go. And if you ever set foot on my property again, I won't aim for the shoulder." The other men, seeing their leader wounded and outmatched, helped Edgar onto his horse. As they retreated, Lillian and Wade turned their attention to the fire, working frantically to contain it before it could spread further. Using blankets from their saddles and shovels Wade kept stored along the fence line for repairs, they managed to beat back the flames. By sunset, all that remained were smoldering patches of earth and the acrid smell of smoke hanging in the air. Exhausted and soot-covered, they made their way back to the cabin in the gathering dusk. Without speaking, they tended to the horses, then took turns washing away the smoke and grime from the day's ordeal. Later, sitting on the porch steps watching stars appear in the darkening sky, Lillian finally broke the silence. "Do you think he'll come back?" Wade considered the question carefully. "Not soon. That bullet will keep him occupied for a while. And afterward, I think he may have learned his lesson. Men like Thompson are cowards at heart. They only fight when they think they can win easily." Lillian nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "I was afraid today," she admitted. "Not of Edgar, though. I was afraid for you." "I had something worth fighting for," Wade said simply, his arm encircling her waist. "So did I," Lillian replied, turning to face him. "You asked me earlier to consider a future here. With you. My answer is yes, Wade. Whatever that future holds, I want to face it by your side." In the silver moonlight, his eyes searched hers. "You're sure? Your divorce will be finalized eventually," she finished for him, "but my heart is already free. And it belongs to you." Wade's hand came up to cradle her cheek, his touch infinitely gentle. "I love you, Lillian Morgan," he said, the simple declaration carrying the weight of absolute truth. And I love you, Wade Harrington, she answered, her voice steady and sure. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the demanding, possessive kisses Edgar had forced upon her. This was a meeting of equals, tender yet passionate, a promise exchanged without words. The following spring, Lillian's divorce was granted by the territorial court. Edgar Thompson, his pride wounded more severely than his shoulder, had left the territory for the gold fields of Montana, offering no contest to the proceedings. On a perfect May morning, with wildflowers carpeting the prairie in a riot of color, Lillian and Wade were married beneath an arch he had built beside the creek where they had first spoken of their future together. The ceremony was simple, attended only by a few neighboring ranchers and the circuit preacher who had ridden 2 days to perform the service. Lillian wore a dress of pale blue, her hair loose around her shoulders the way Wade preferred it. As they spoke their vows, birds sang in the cottonwoods along the creek, nature itself seeming to celebrate their union. I promise to cherish you, protect you, and stand beside you through whatever life brings, Wade vowed, his voice strong and clear. Not as your keeper, but as your partner in all things. And I promise to love you, support you, and build our dreams together, Lillian replied, tears of joy sparkling in her eyes. Not as a possession, but as your equal, your friend, and your wife. As the years passed, the Harrington Ranch flourished under their combined care. Wade's cattle operation expanded, while Lillian's garden grew into a small but productive farm that supplied not only their table but produced enough excess to sell in town. The small cabin by the creek became a proper home, with rooms added as their family grew. First came William, born on a winter's night with snow piling against the windows. 2 years later, Emma arrived in the middle of a spring thunderstorm, a fitting echo of the night her parents' story began. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the children were asleep, Wade and Lillian would sit on their expanded porch, watching fireflies dance above the prairie grass. Do you ever think about how differently our lives might have gone? Lillian asked one such night, her head resting on her husband's shoulder. Wade's arm tightened around her. Every day, if that storm hadn't driven you to my door. If you hadn't been the kind of man who would open it to a stranger. If you hadn't had the courage to run. Lillian smiled, watching a shooting star trace a brilliant path across the dark canvas of the sky. Some storms bring destruction, she mused, and some bring new beginnings. Ours brought both, Wade observed, pressing a kiss to her temple. And I wouldn't change a single raindrop. As night deepened around their home, the home they had built together from fear and hope, struggle and love, Lillian Morgan Harrington knew with absolute certainty that she had found what every soul seeks. Not merely shelter from life's storms, but someone with whom to weather them, hand in hand, heart to heart, come what may.